How did Jerry Seinfeld accomplish the things listed in our Public Speaking Chapter 1 book? Organizing his thoughts. I'm sure that Jerry already had it planned out what he was going to say, what he was going to do when he went out there. And I think as he was introduced, he probably did have the nervousness, even after doing this for 30 years. I'm sure that there's still nervousness going on inside him. I believe he took the time when he was thanking the audience, he was thanking David Letterman, he was thanking the band as they played, and he was thanking those folks. I believe at that point in time he was probably bringing all that nervousness up into a positiveness. I can't be sure about that, but that's kind of what it looked like. And he was relaying that in his thankfulness and in his introduction. He pauses for dramatic effect. He keeps everything straightforward. He keeps on track. And he pauses for dramatic effect, obviously. He uses his hands for gesturing. He keeps all these things going to maintain his routine. Tailoring his message to the audience. His jokes contain well-known items, places, and events that everyone there can relate to. Example, the 5-hour energy drink. I can't go anywhere in this town, anywhere in Carrollton, anywhere in this state that I won't run into that. I see it in the public grocery store. I see it in the gas station. I see it at the Walgreens. You see it every time you go into one of these places. So it's right there. You're going to see it every time. Also, the New York restaurants. Well, he's in New York. He lives in New York. He knows New York better than anything. I believe he is targeting New York to his audience because the audience is probably going to know something about New York. And as far as the restaurants are concerned, obviously they have experienced something like this. Therefore, their laughter and things of that nature. The last thing I would say that the ballpark franks, the ballpark hot dogs, they're not the greatest. They're not the best stuff in the world. Probably filled with all kind of just ungodly stuff. But yeah, they're good, but they're really not good for you, and they suck. But they're great. Having it at the ball game, you got to have one of those. Telling a story for impact. Obviously, Jerry Seinfeld is the best at what he does. He is a great comedian. I've watched Seinfeld from day one. I've seen it several times over reruns and things like that. But Jerry is always exaggerating his words. He's playing on words. He uses hand gestures. And he keeps on track with those type things, and he does pause for a dramatic effect. He also pauses to allow the audience to get it to sink in that joke he just laid out there, and he lays it out there just right. Adapting to the listener's feedback. Well, obviously, he didn't have anybody raising their hands during the taping of this show. He didn't have anyone asking questions during this time. He simply laid out his jokes in a way that it's going to answer any questions that came up. He was going to do that. And the only other feedback I would say would probably be the applause and the laughter that come with it. Now, let's get on to the next 3 items, which is the comparison here. Jerry did exceptionally well as far as presenting his thing. Public speaking, number one, public speaking is more highly structured. And that is true. As far as a conversation, I'm not going to talk to my son the way I would talk to a group of people. That's just not going to happen. But Jerry did an exceptionally fine job of delivering his routine in the short amount of time that he had. I have watched other comedians, and they just sometimes may have too much time. They may have a time that they have to fill with just stuff that's not really good material. And just an example of that would be Eddie Murphy, for instance. I recently watched Eddie Murphy and Delirious and saw Raw again. I thought it was funny the first time I had seen it, but that's been years ago, so I watched it again. Delirious is still just all out funny to the end. But now, Raw, on the other hand, was just a big letdown. It seemed like he was trying too hard. He was trying too hard to fill up stuff, and he had some of the longest monologues, way out there, long monologues, to take up time, take up space, and it just didn't work for me. It wasn't as good as I thought it would be. We'll get rid of that one. As far as the next thing, it says public speaking requires more formal language. Obviously, that is kind of where Jerry is coming from. He's always been very formal. He always articulates. He always speaks very clearly. He always says the right things, and he stays away from the negative stuff. He stays away from the slang words. Now, other comedians may not be like that. Other comedians are going to use the words. They're going to use the slang terms and say stuff that's just not appropriate in some situations. But now you got to think about where these other comedians are coming from. They have to target their audience. And the audiences, for instance, again, with Eddie Murphy in Delirious, those folks wanted to come and see Eddie Murphy be just hilarious and funny and use those slang words and use those things. That's just the world we live in. They're going to want to see that sort of stuff. As far as that being used in another public place, say for an awards ceremony or in front of the president or things like that, I don't think that would be appropriate. So that would be one thing that would have to change for Eddie Murphy if he was going to do that. And there that one goes. All right. Jerry is very, very well dressed. Let me just read that real quick. Public speaking requires a different method of delivery. Of course it does. Jerry, in this sense, is very well dressed. Most comedians that I've watched over the years are very well dressed. Going back to Eddie Murphy again, man, he was in total leather, for crying out loud. I don't even know how he even lasted through those sets that he did that were live. I mean, he had to be sweating to death. But most are well dressed. Most, I will say, Larry the Cable Guy is probably the least well dressed comedian I've ever watched. But anyway, we'll just skip that. But most of the time, they're very well dressed and proper. Now, Jerry never stammered. He never used the words and and things like that. He didn't go into that direction. He was very straight, very audience focused. He was talking to them. He wasn't meandering around, looking around. He was very dedicated to what he was doing. There are other comedians I have watched that do some things that maybe are taking time away from the audience. They use a microphone or a microphone stand, or they use a stool or something like that that will distract them, I think, or maybe give them time to think of the next line or the next pun or joke or whatever. But they may fiddle with it. They may move it around. They may move the stool over. They may sit on it. They may get up. They may move the stool again. It's just kind of a distraction to them, so they're not focusing so much on the audience. And again, if they do have some audience that's distracting, maybe a comment or maybe a heckle or whatever, that sometimes they will reply to that heckle. Sometimes they may reply to that shout out or person or something like that. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And I guess that would be kind of the end of that. But anyway, so there's that and that and that. And thank you for your time. And here is my little man, if I can get it up here. It's some chicken with juice dumped on it. You want that? Thanks.